All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, this one I think is an important one because we are going off a comment from our last one that starts with, not to get you guys canceled, but
Yeah.
okay, so we know that's going to be a good one. Uh, Thank you, Isomorphic, and we will take your comments and break it down a little bit. One thing we don't do very well is if you are new and you just got here and you're here for the first, give us at least 5 minutes. And we do have some regular commenters or a regular commenter. But if you leave before those 5 minutes, leave a comment of why you did,
Mhm.
because we need to learn. And if it's just y'all are dumb, okay, cool, whatever. Cool story, bro. But yeah, we're going. So this actually is a continuation of what we talked about last time with the grooming gangs. But I think it's going to be a little more abstract than that. But at least my part of the discussion. Uh, and Yeah, we'll go from there and we'll have a little fun football talk after that again because the playoffs are still going and we love it here. And that's our fun time. We're going to
Mhm.
try to keep this one short. Like, share, subscribe, whatever. And let's get going.
All right, so you want me to start with just reading the full comment, or do you want to go bit by bit here?
My biggest thing is all you need is that first paragraph for my start of it.
Mhm.
Everything else kind of continues on that.
All right. Well, I'm not trying to get you guys canceled, but the more I'm exposed to the diversity, the more racist I become. Rationally racist is going to be the new based trend. What the court documents describe, and he's referring to um, the gangs, the grooming gangs, rape gangs out of the UK, and again, Sam brought up some of the court documents. It's ugly stuff, all right, and so this is factual stuff coming out of court proceedings, and it's icky. And as Ideals is going to go on to say here, uh, yeah, and that's the world, that's history, and frankly, a lot of the world still that we here in the modernized, industrialized, technologicalized West, we don't realize it, and
Mhm.
unless have actually gone overseas to there's a reason the media lost its mind over shithole countries, and a whole lot of other people went, yeah, and
Okay, so
because
let
they
me let,
are.
let me bring up something right in the beginning because this is we have to resist a certain temptation here. And
Hmm.
it's a temptation to oversimplify, which actually is what racism is
Hmm.
oversimplifying. So I want to bring one back from way of the beginning when we started all this. Good old Shelby Steele.
Mm.
All right. And I put the picture up with the quote on purpose because if someone clips it after I say this is a quote from Shelby Steele
Uh-huh.
and pieces of this quote, then they could make me sound racist using pieces of this quote, right?
Mhm.
So if someone says, here's the video, and they hear me talking and you can see the whole quote, then if you don't acknowledge that, you're an idiot. Uh, here's the quote. What is racist? I have racist impulses. I've never met a human being who didn't. We will always have to watch out for those impulses in ourselves. They are automatic. They are reflexive. They're not reflective. They're reflexive and we will always have to watch out for that and make them utterly impermissible. So that's our good friend Shelby Steele on the thing that we all have in us
Mhm.
that we have to be careful of. And when things like this happen, it is very, 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 very easy to divert back to our impulses versus taking a deep breath and thinking rationally. This is why I like systems. And I dynamic systems is probably the best psychological theory. And I personally like systems myself, even though everybody's like, oh, I thought you said you're unorganized or whatever. That's actually where systems come in because you can actually take the situation and you have a system for evaluating that situation. As a training example, to get us canceled with my overly simplified uh, diagnosis of the client, if I have a 44-year-old white suburban female come into my office for the first time for training, I could very easily put her in a box of white 44-year-old suburban female, assume she's on Xanax and she's going to be hyper anxious and she's probably got knee problems because she would starve herself and run every time there was a reunion coming up, and now that's caught up to her and she's looking for something. Okay, so I can put her in that box. And guess what? Chances are I'm correct if you go by the odds. But that's not what the system does.
Hmm.
I have a system for evaluating people based on the inputs that come in the door. So I watch the way she walks. I watch the way she moves. I listen to her evaluation of what's on her pain scale. What's this? What's that? All of these things are the inputs that go into my diagnosis. And sure, it may end up what I just said, but it's not guaranteed. And so I have a system for doing that. And in the West, what we have is a system of justice if we would just use it.
Mhm.
And I have this up for those that are just watching. It is the justice is blind. It is the statue of the lady with the scales with a blindfold on. And here's where we get in the trap of oversimplification. You have on one side, I'm going to say the isomorphic side based on the comment, where you're profiling. And you are making a justice assumption based on immutable characteristics. In this situation, if you threw that shit at the fan, most of it would stick, but not all of it, right? So, but I'll give an American example that would be the other way. In the United States, most of your child porn uh, suspects are middle-aged white dudes, right? On their computer with their beer gut or whatever, and their Cheetos and Mountain Dew and hand lotion, right? That's the profile of the American pedophile, right?
Stop profiling me. It's winter. My hands get dry and crusty.
Uh, whew, okay, how do we come back to that one? Giggity.
The that's a good point in that this was way back in the early 2000s. Journalist and author Michelle Malkin wrote a book called In Defense of Internment, and she was wrong kind of broadly, but right in the specifics and why she wrote the book, which was everyone was freaking out after 9/11 of, oh, we can't overreact and we can't profile. What do you mean we can't profile? 19 of the 22 hijackers came from the same country. That's we can't notice that. Profiling is not bad per se. It is a tool. Where we grew up, the highway we took to get into San Antonio was the dividing line. I don't know if it's still this way, but it was the
Bloods and
dividing
Crips.
line between gangs.
You didn't wear blue on the east side of the
Mhm.
street or the northeast side of the street, and you didn't wear red on the southwest side of the street.
So if there is a dead body, a murder victim, and it's on this side of the street wearing these colors, the police know, okay, we are probably looking for a young black male hanging out with the other young black males wearing these colors.
Mhm.
That's who we're looking for. Probably. It is a tool, but then that is where you begin your investigation. So there is nothing wrong with profiling per se. It is a tool. How are you using it?
Mhm.
And
Well, but I'm speaking in this case because let me go into the other. So I did one oversimplification, which is the over profiling, right?
mhm,
The other oversimplification is what the other side is doing, the side that's in power in the UK right now,
mhm,
which is overcompensating due to the lack of equity. That is also not blind.
mhm,
So over profiling is not blind justice. Over protecting based on immutable characteristics is also not blind justice. So what they're, so, oh, this might cause problems in the community if we arrest these people, is their nice way of saying we want to be woke and just do
mhm,
this thing. And probably they're guilty of it too, but that's another story.
mhm,
But at the same time, so, oh, well, we see that the perpetrator is this, so we're not going to do anything. That's not blind justice either. And so the cure for that is you have to harden yourself to the results of a blind system. So if it's blind orchestra auditions, which is what we used to have until the woke took over,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be okay with the fact that you're probably going to get mostly Asians.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. Because they spend more time learning the violin than white people or black people or Hispanic people. But the audition was blind. It was just. If we do in the UK, if we evidence for rape of minors, DNA evidence, witness evidence, victim comes forward, all of these things, if we do the justice system based on those things, you are going to have disparate outcomes. And you have to be okay with that. In the United States, if you crack down on child porn, you have to be okay with mostly white dudes going to jail. If you crack down on looting in San Francisco, you have to be okay with mostly minority people going to jail. If you crack down on drugs in the valley of Texas, the valley is the south, central to east south of Texas, the extreme east south going towards the border. You have to be okay with mostly Hispanics going to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to do it in a blind way and be okay with the result, because that's just the way it is. More black people live in the inner city. If you do a crackdown in the inner city for the things that make the inner city bad, you have to be okay with the outcome of that. And I think that's the cure, is blind justice and being okay with the outcome and coming on the back end and saying, why are we getting these disparate outcomes and what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of the inner city part, well, we've got ways that we can try to clean up inner cities, and part of that is getting the riffraff off the streets. Because part of the problem with the inner cities is they're not uh, enforcing the laws to such a degree that the dangerous people are not oppressing. There is oppression in inner cities, and it's the dangerous people doing it, not the
Yeah.
government. It's the government not doing anything that creates the oppression.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Back to Ideal's point here, though, something you have talked about a lot when it comes to DEI, CRT, etc., is the reaction is the point.
Mhm.
And so I'm sure there have been a lot of instances of viral videos of usually female black college students freaking out and shrieking at and sometimes physically assaulting someone because how dare you braid your hair because that's ours. That's cultural appropriation. How dare you come in here because this is our space.
Mhm.
It's so that is a brainwashed skull full of mush, but there's a part of me that thinks no, because so much of this comes from postmodernism, Marxism, from the people who are pushing this, they want that action because they want the reaction, which is to Ideal's point. The more this kind of woke ideology is pushed, the more you are going to get counter reactions of racism.
I'm looking for one right now.
So, and that is your point of you need to protect against that. That was Shelby Steele's point is it isn't it isn't because these people are this ethnicity or have this shade of skin. It's because they come from this culture and this culture sucks. Okay. They're eating the cats and dogs. How much did that affect the election? Who knows? But I had to have some impact on it because it was so absurd and it was so verifiably true. Why? Because these people come from this culture and this culture sucks. Okay. Um, Dinesh D'Souza, he's got darker skin. He comes from a culture that I don't think is that great. I don't want to live in India, but he is a fully fledged American and he loves America and he actively assimilated into the culture of America. I've brought him up before, but take the skin color out of it. Charles C.W. Cook, I think he is now the head editor at National Review. He is a British immigrant, so he is as white as they get. He kind of looks like Shaggy from Scooby Doo. Um, and yet he loves guns, NASCAR, and American football, and the Constitution above all else. He came to America to work and to become an American, not just for the work, not just for the stuff. And that's the problem with these gangs in Western Europe is they didn't go there to be Swedish or German or British. They went there for the stuff and they wanted to keep their culture. That's what's happening here. You know, take the other example I had was, I've been to Korea. I've studied a little bit. I've studied Japan a lot, and I've been to Japan. It's different because they have a different underlying culture, but their westernized, industrialized, lowercase L liberal democracies share a lot of similarities with the US and Western Europe because they have embraced those ideals and then incorporated those positive parts of Western European culture and then adapted it to their own ethnic historical culture. And so those kinds of things can transcend if you want them to. But again, to a lot of these groups that we're talking about, they don't want to. They just want the stuff and they want to keep what and where they came from and just transplant it.
This was the example I was thinking of. This is from Colin Wright's X account, but he responded to Elijah Schaffer, who I think we've all heard of, but aren't all familiar with. So he's infamously famous, but I know he's a reporter of some kind. But his comment, Elijah Schaffer's comment, was Americans are European ethnically. Everyone else is a guest, not sorry. And of course, Wright responded with, this guy's a racist loser. And that's the trap we got to avoid. And that's exactly what Lindsay was talking about with the woke right, is now there is a bigger issue, and this is part of it. Remember what I said, we got to enforce the law blindly. But the second part was to come in and see what's going on. And that's where immigration comes in, because we need an immigration system that is blind, but has standards that reinforce Western values, right? And that's the thing. You will weed out the people you were talking about profiling if you enforce Western values in the immigration process.
A great example of this is I appreciate why they did it, to put them on the record and to make a political point. But this Laken Riley law is stupid. So this, for anyone who doesn't know, in the US, they just pushed through a vote that would categorically require that Immigration Customs Enforcement would deport anyone, I don't remember if it was convicted of or charged with any illegal immigrant who commits a sex crime. The key word there is illegal immigrant. They should already be being deported. I understand the political point, the philosophical point, because you had something like 150 something Democrats in the House voted against it.
Yeah, two
Only
voted
51,
for.
Yeah,
two voted for.
And so I appreciate the political point, but you're reinforcing the problem here, which is, guys, they're already here illegally. They should already be being deported. Do we have a system of law or do we not? And we don't, which is why this is such a problem, is because we have for half a century completely ignored this issue and not followed our own laws.
Oh, 10 Democrats voted for.
Oh, well, good for them.
Now, I was looking to see if I can get a list of names so we could shout them out. But yeah, it's
anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Let me get back to the comment though, because I wanted to he makes a good point about the
let me give a
historical
practical
example.
reason for the Laken Riley thing real quick before we get off of it, since it's there. And I don't think it will come up again. Here's the practical. We're so far into this, and this is what we have to accept as American citizens who were against this open border thing from the beginning. We're so far into this, we have to have a priority scale to getting people out, because it would take complete martial law. And even that would fail to just get everybody who came over here illegally out. So we have to have a priority scale, and I'm pretty cool with putting murderers and rapists on the top of that. So if that's the first step to getting the worst of the worst out, then that's fine. That I'm cool with that.
That is a good point. Because you can't just wave a wand and then just automatically get everybody out. You only have so much personnel and so much time in the day. So yes, you do have to prioritize. You do have to triage the problem here.
And the next step would be we do have good profiling as far as psychological profiling of what smaller crimes typically are characteristic of people who are going to commit more violent crimes later, right?
Yes.
So we do have good data on that, and then that would be the next tier, right? You're caught for, I don't know, aggravated property assault or something. You're probably more likely to be someone who would actually go through with the aggravated assault too. So we could add those to the list, and all
Mhm.
just down the list to the we're not deporting everybody who gets a traffic ticket, right?
Yeah.
Because that would take way too much.
Let me back up just a second because this actually ties into the historical point that Ideals is making here, which is this is one of the reasons I don't like X is the quips. Okay, you're racist, loser, and wrong. Okay, yeah, but why? It is important to note that actually, no, Americans aren't just ethnically European. That is way too broad.
In fact, that comment plays into the woke because they're going to be like,
Exactly.
actually, no, you came here.
Well, yes, but so it's wrong on multiple levels. Philosophically, America is mostly Scottish because it was mostly Scottish thinkers who were the great British Enlightenment writers. And that philosophically is where we come from. You also have a very strong German influence, which is where a lot of the culture and society comes from, and the work ethic the Protestant work ethic that they brought with them to a lot of communities. And something that is interesting to point out when we get into these racial debates is to Shelby Steele points, yeah, everybody's a little bit, at least, everyone has that impulse. And you can see that tribalism throughout history. And now we are at a point where if you have pale skin, you're white, you're European. Mediterraneans weren't considered white for a very long time. If you were not just Italian, so you'll see the memes about the Italians, and it was primarily southern Italy and Sicily. If you had that darker Mediterranean look, you weren't considered white, so to speak. You weren't European if you were Polish. No, you were European if you were Western European, primarily German and British. So these things aren't as simplistic as literal black and white as we try and make them now. And again, that impulse has always been there. An example I like to use is World War II. World War II, the language of it was framed racially. And a lot of people like to make a big deal about the racism of it. And that was everybody. Again, the US is in an odd position because we are one of the very few multicultural societies that has managed to survive ever. So when Churchill talked, a lot of his language was racial. He would talk about fighting the Hun. So you're racially separating the Anglo-Saxon or the Anglo-American, as they sometimes called it, alliance with the German, who are different. The Germans obviously had racial language. The the Soviets, hyped up their culture and race versus the Western Germanic invaders. You know, everybody did this. This isn't new. We think that we have it all figured out now, and we think we're so special and enlightened, and it's not new. And to back to Ideal's point, there are big chunks of the world that are still very medieval in their thinking and in their action. Back to where I left off about the court documents. What the court documents describe was always reserved for the spoils of war. It's not a quip, it's not a flippant remark. Think about why wars were raged before they got arguably industrialized with World War I on the basic level. There was never enough loot to go around. For the basic foot soldier, it was a chance for progeny. Rape is the spoil of conquest. Most men didn't have much chance at procreating unless they conquer a woman. Even kings aimed to conquer queens. I feel like our mind has been poisoned with historians trying to invent economic and socio-political reasons to justify their own occupation. As an aside, I will add to that that yes, especially once you get into the graduate level, it becomes a running joke for how specialized you have to get because everyone has to do something new. And mine, quip that I always was I'm going to study left-handed Lithuanians living in Los Angeles in the latter century. It becomes that absurdly specialized. But then also remember, Marx thought of himself as a social scientist, and he used history to justify what he was projecting. And you get a lot of that influence in the history field. So we have to pound the square peg into the round hole and make retcon the past to make it fit into this economic viewpoint that we have. When, to Ideal's point, yeah, it was much more basic than that. It was about taking that person's stuff and their women.
Well, I have Better Angels of Your Nature up there.
Yeah.
Because Pinker talks about even in Middle Age Europe, we talk about chivalry. Mm-hmm. And the old adage that a maiden can walk from one side of the land to the other without worrying about a hair on her head being harmed or whatever. Mm-hmm. Key word there was maiden, which mm-hmm. meant unmarried woman. If you were married to another knight, you were not only captured, you were raped and pillaged and then ransomed back to them. Mm-hmm. So it is the key word was maiden. And probably because that knight was trying to make her not maiden anymore the right way. Right. So if you were married to another knight or just married, period, you didn't get the same protections.
Yeah, it was incumbent on your husband to protect you.
Yep.
Back to the topic at hand, though. Every man has an innate compulsion to protect the women of his tribe because women carry the key and the holy grail to eternal life. They are also the gene banks of the tribe. Conquest is about robbing those banks, contaminating them with an alien seed, not yours. I feel revolted and enraged even typing that. The imagery fills me with holy wrath, which brings me back to the point I was making. Why wage the war on a battlefield where Pakistanis, Arabs, dare I say, Africans can't win when we give away winner's prize for free? Either white people, the racial minority of the world, realize what's going on, or we're doomed, us and our culture. The Nordic/Slavic blonde white girl or a Mediterranean brunette, the genetic marvel that we carefully bred and selected through our systems of excellence, aristocracy, and aesthetics, the proto-Hyperboreans that we worked thousands of years to become, being gagged and gang raped by a bunch of inbred, low IQ brown savages. Yes, let's get canceled. As a sacrifice to the dead god of meritocracy.
We are quoting a comment here. Yes.
Hold on.
The thing is, it does worry me because if you notice, you had to go through extra steps to see the comment.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. I don't know if that's a YouTube thing where it kind of like shadow silences it. And I don't know if someone who just sees the video for the first time sees that comment. So we're taking a big risk here, YouTube. Listen to the whole thing with your AI algorithm on what we're doing. Yeah.
I like his point about the dead god of meritocracy, which postulates that if you dress up a monkey in a suit and let it sit in the classroom with the rest of us, it will become a human. The narcissistic mind committing suicide because it does not have humility to admit defeat in the nature versus nurture debate. For it would mean admitting that we are not gods who can shape society and people however we desire. I've seen this drama too many times in people's personal lives. Closest relatives turning on each other, wishing ill on their own offspring or parents because they do not want to admit being wrong on some issue. It's only right that the civilization as a whole can be afflicted with the same sickness, the ego of the mind, the cure, faith.
Yeah, and this is where I like to use the US as an example because we are the melting pot of the world. We are the most diverse population in the entire world, even compared to the UK right now with their issues, because it's kind of a binary. They're not as diverse as we are as the United States. It's not white, black, Hispanic, Asian, South Asian, East Asian, uh, all the different kinds of white, because we can separate those, right? All the different kinds of African descent, because we can separate those because they're not all the same. So here in the States, we have to separate on ideals. And, not to be funny here, but they're not all isomorphic, right? All ideals are not isomorphic because we're talking about the difference between two cultures right now. And we have to have Western ideals emphasized. And this is important because to get the job done, as I said last time, but not as clearly, is we need the better angels of that culture to be the frontline defense against the bad things. Because the thing about this culture in question is they're where Christianity was 500 years ago, where the basis human nature of tribalism and doctrine and indoctrination and purity and all of the things that came out bubbled up into very bad results, right? So the Salem witch trials, for one, there were politics behind it, but everybody had to be behind the bad things happening because of the worst angels of our nature. And it took people, the other magistrates from around, when they figured it out, saying, "Hey, that's not what we stand for."
Mhm.
And so what we need is the good angels within that culture to be the frontline defense. We need the young men that aren't like that to confront the young men that are like that and be the first line of defense for these young ladies, these budding prepubescent young women, girls, before the cops have to get involved.
Mhm.
And if they can't stop it, they need to be the first person to report the thing. And that's where things are going to get better. We need to be appealing to the good people in that culture, because then you change the whole culture. Then you take it in the direction that where most of Christianity has gotten to this day, where all these bad things that you could twist up verses to get happening are virtually not existent anymore, because the good people projected the meme of forgiveness and of all the other things that we attribute to Western culture from Christianity, right? Fairness, forgiveness, all of these things. Uh, and we need to we're not gonna get rid of that whole culture. That would be genocide. That would be a holy war this planet can't survive. And it would just be wrong. You have to appeal to the better people of the culture, to the positive aspects of that culture, to say no. And not only to say no, but actually be rewarded for enforcing no. And it provides a front line, and it changes the whole culture, because you're not getting everybody out. Just like we just talked about with deporting all the illegal immigrants here in the States. You're not going to get that all out. What you have to do is get the bad ones out. And you have to encourage the good ones to do good things.
So your talk of better angels and ideals, talking about the micro reflecting on the macro, made me think of one of the more famous quotes that a lot of people don't know where it even came from, about if men were angels, no government would be necessary. And it is James Madison writing in Federalist number 51. Madison, who is the primary author of the Constitution. And this is the quote in context. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the government, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. much of the awfulness that we currently exist in, to Ideal's point, is because too many people have convinced themselves of the perfectibility of man,
Yeah.
both on a micro level for themselves
I'm going to add a
because
couple
they
words
got a
to your
partition
statement.
trophy and they're so special, and then on the macro level, because we are perfectible, we can create perfect institutions and
Yeah,
have
well,
perfect results.
and that yeah, I was going to add two words to your statement: top down perfectibility.
Mm,
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's why I hate social roles theory, because if you think everything is socially mediated, it's very tempting to fall down the rabbit hole of saying everything can be socially engineered. And that is not the case. In fact, the reason why this is a problem, and I'm going to compare this to the LA wildfires here, so stick with me, is we have something in our human nature as young men that bubbles up, and it is Western society that suppresses that, which is the propensity to want to find a mate at a very young age when she's at her peak viability for reproduction, and spread our seed. I mean, that he used that in his comments, putting the seed in, right? But Western culture has overcome that to some degree. Uh, but we have a culture, and this is where culture comes in, because so that is under the surface. In LA, we had a bunch of dry brush, and all it took, and dry brush and a season of extreme high winds, which is the natural thing. Those were both natural. The brush is there because it grows, and the
hmm
winds are there because it's the Santa Ana winds this time of year.
Yep.
And all it took was a spark. And one of the things that people aren't talking about when it comes to the wildfires is mentally ill homeless people were setting fires to stay warm in the high winds. And that was one of the things that got this ball rolling. It is not the only thing, and we don't know
hmm
the initial cause 100%, but it is one of the causes. There are videos of people trying to get these homeless people to stop lighting fires in the middle of everything. But they're like, no, I'm doing a good thing. I'm getting rid of this trash, or I'm trying to stay warm, because they're not mentally there. And so that was the spark that was needed to start this thing that is a huge. And so what we have in UK is young males' natural inclination to do something that is bad. The fact that we are humans, and he said the monkey in a suit, put a human in the jungle and see what happens, right?
hmm
We go back to our baser nature. And then you have a culture that says it's okay.
There's a reason
The
Lord of the
culture that says
Flies
it's
used to be
okay is the
required
people
reading.
lighting the fire, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
All right. Well, believe it or not, I have a segue to football about this because
Because the
um
Texans are playing Kansas City and we have to appeal to authority to get a flag our way for once.
appealing to authority is a fallacy when you're talking about the woke NFL and officiating.
Ugh.
Anyway, no. What I to Ideal's point about creating racists with this racial language is one of the stupid things that is happening in stupid sports journalism right now is the MVP debate
Mm,
between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. One of the beautiful things about sports is supposed to be that it is what it is. It's math. Did you make the shot or not?
hmm
Did your putt go in or not? And now we can have some fun in debating topics that are only tangentially related to that, like Brown or Peyton or Sanders, or who's the best running back of all time. Well, I say Sanders because, you know, but they didn't play in the same era. They didn't play on the same teams. So there is a subjective nature to that. But their stats are their stats, right? And it's one of the beautiful things about why I love baseball so much is because it has changed so little, at least since the dead ball era ended. So for damn near 100 years now. No, actually, yeah, about 100 years now. Um, so the stats are the stats, and that's what should matter. And rather than celebrating this achievement because both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson did things this season that no other quarterback has ever done. They both set records. They both had incredible stats. They both led their teams to a high playoff seeding uh and now they're about to meet in the playoffs. It should be an incredible celebration of excellence, and then the debate should be more fun, even if it gets heated and emotional, because we are emotionally invested in these things that ultimately aren't supposed to matter. But we can't have nice things, because instead, what is happening is the hustlers and the brainwashed are making it a racial issue. If Lamar Jackson doesn't win, it's because he's black and y'all are all racist.
Mm-hmm. Hold
What
on,
the
I'm
effing
bringing up
F?
their. I'm bringing up the side by side of their
Yeah.
stats. I was looking for a good picture because there were so many biased ones, but this is the best I got, and it's so freaking close.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, uh, passing TDs, Jackson wins. Rushing TDs, Allen wins. Passing yards, Jackson wins. Interceptions, Jackson barely wins. I mean, but team record, Allen wins. So here's my thing. Why don't we go a little loose with the rules and the voting here, and who wins this game gets it? Why not, right?
Yeah.
They don't announce it, they don't do it till after the playoff games, but it's supposed to only be based on the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
So why not we say, hey, it's a freaking tie. They're playing each other in the playoffs. Whoever wins gets it.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair to me.
Yeah.
Then you don't have a racial component at all.
Yeah. And frankly, I think with both of these two competitors, that would be how they would want it.
Mm-hmm.
Of if I don't get it done, I don't get it done. It's why I love Lamar Jackson is his, his catchphrase is nobody cares, work harder.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is why I don't know if he has said anything, but I wish he would if he hasn't. It's incumbent upon the athlete where something is being made about you that's not there to
Mm-hmm.
say it. It's we got Twitter. Throw out a tweet. It'll be the front page sports news if Lamar Jackson says, "Hey, this ain't about race. It's close." Something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's all about the work. Let's leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so incredibly frustrating that this is why it's what I ranted about a little bit when we talked, a couple months ago when Major League Baseball incorporated the Negro League statistics into the official Major League Baseball statistics. It's come on, guys. It- this is why we can't have nice things because you're so blinded by this regressive ideology, and this obsession with race is one of those components because it is an obsession with tribalism that we were supposedly moving past. It was a long road, but we were supposedly moving past this to know what matters are ideals and results. Um, even the Thomas Sowell has this great quote, and I wish I could remember, but just paraphrasing, where he basically says, actually, meritocracy isn't that great of uh, a title. That's not really what we are, because what is merit? It's do you deserve this? Well, no, it's not do you deserve it, is what are the results? We are a resultocracy. I like to use the example of Ben Carson. If you look at his story, oh my gosh, who is more deserving than this guy that came out of pretty awful poverty in a rough situation with a single mother and then pushed himself to reach the heights of a ludicrously technical field of neurosurgery and successfully separating conjoined twins. Why are we bringing up Joe Burrow's stats?
Because if it was all stats oriented, Joe Burrow's the MVP.
Heh, he had almost 5,000 yards throwing.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
43
the
TDs and only 9 interceptions. Wow.
yeah, and this doesn't even show if the rushing TDs, but they're going to say, "Oh, but he didn't make the playoffs. He's only
Hmm.
9-8." Okay, so now we're talking record. So Allen wins. So
Hmm.
what's your argument is the thing. What I was going for was I was looking up the team defenses because I was going to bring in other factors that could. Okay, so Lamar beat Allen on a few stats. Well, who had the better defense?
Hmm.
If you got the better defense, you have the ball more. If you and in short fields, all of these things play into it. So yeah, it's just too deep of
And
a discussion to have.
that's what the discussion should be about, is what are the results and which results matter more. Well, I say these results matter more, you know, well, no, these results matter more because that is why I call this infection regressive. The woke mind virus is regressive, not progressive. It is going backwards in our simplistic tribal thinking.
And Baltimore did have the better team defense. So there you go.
All right. Well, moving on, we have got the divisional round, which a lot of people consider the best round because you've got 4 games Saturday, 4 games Sunday, and they're all good teams, really good teams. So you usually don't get any blowouts in the divisional week.
All right.
So
Here's our
pulling up,
updated brackets for Super Bowl licks.
so my gut that this is why I don't gamble, because you have a gut for a reason. And what is that? That is all of the variable inputs that you can't quite intellectually objectively cite, but you have all of these inputs that you're intuiting. And so my thinking on Pittsburgh Baltimore was the game was going to be the second half, but it clearly wasn't.
It wasn't ever.
That second half, kudos to the Steelers for making it a game. Baltimore was still clearly in charge even in the second half, but it was shaping up to be a 42-0 blowout.
I turned the game off with 7 minutes left and then woke
Mm-hmm.
up in the morning to check the score, and it was exactly the same as
Mm-hmm.
when I turned it off. So I'm kind of glad I focused on sleep instead. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I should have looked a little closer at the way it's not just that the Steelers backed into the playoffs, it's looking at the box scores for those games. It was like the playoff game. They let teams get up big on them and then couldn't come back.
mhm.
But ultimately the AFC, we thought there might be some upsets. There were potential upsets there, but I think we have all picked 1, 2, 3, 4, didn't we? We
No,
both did.
you picked the Chargers to win,
Oh,
and you
that's right.
picked Pittsburgh to win.
No, I was hemming and hawing on that one. My gut was, but I didn't think they would actually do it.
I thought you
I just
officially did because I kept saying
no,
I hope you're wrong. I hope you're right, but I think you're wrong.
no, that was just me
Okay.
thinking out loud, wondering why is my gut feeling like this could be a significant upset here.
Yeah, but you picked the
Um,
Chargers to win.
I did. I was afraid that Houston would lose a close game, and I thought the Chargers defense would keep it close, and they
I,
did
I should have
for a
had queued
half.
up. I should have had queued up the big reel that came out of that from the Houston headquarters.
Uh-huh.
It's Rex Ryan saying, "Well, who would have thunk the Chargers would get a bye week? They get to go to Houston. They don't even
Oh
have to
wow.
play and all this stuff." And then it was the highlights from the game. And
Yeah.
yeah, but what did I say? So everything up until the evening game on Sunday, not only were the winning teams that I predicted, but exactly how I predicted it would.
Hmm.
And Houston, I said, we match up well one-on-one with the receivers. If we play man and put men in the box, we'll stop the run and we'll get a bunch of interceptions and all of that. And our offense will do just enough.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what happened because we actually started the game playing a soft zone with 6 in the box. and they ran up the field, and luckily we stopped them and held them to a field goal.
Yeah.
But basically, they were having their way with us. And as soon as we went away with that and manned up on their receivers, especially that, what is it, McConkey or whatever his name was, when we manned up Stingley on him, that's when the game turned. And after that, it was what in an,
The second half was
Herbert,
a blowout. Yeah.
Herbert threw more interceptions in that game than he did all season.
Hmm.
And plus the sacks, plus we did just enough on offense, especially once we finally got our running game going. Amazing how that works to close the game out. So it went exactly how I thought.
Hmm.
Baltimore, I knew was going to blow Pittsburgh out. Buffalo was kind of like the Houston game. It started slow, and Denver looked like they were going to have a chance, and then Buffalo just showed
Yeah.
them who they were.
Denver start the first quarter at least. Denver was, whoa, hey, they came to play. And
But
then,
they had more yards
yeah.
on that first drive than they had the rest of the game. So
Yeah.
it's
Um, I was a little disappointed in the Tampa Bay game because I was rooting for, Baker Mayfield is worth rooting for. I really like Todd Bowles. I think he's a great guy and a really good defensive coach. So
well,
I
and
was
and
surprised at Tampa's inability to shut down Daniels. But that's the kid's playing good and he's got a good coordinator with him.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I put a bug out. I know someone who knows Kingsbury, and I put out there. I said, tell your buddy my idea on if the guy who makes the sack is celebrating, run up to the
mhm,
line and run a
mhm.
play. Yeah, so he said he told him. I don't know if it's ever going to come out. If you see that from Washington in the next couple years,
Yeah,
it came from here. It came from here. But
you called it. So I wasn't that surprised. I
that
was a
was the
little
hardest game for
disappointed.
me to call last week,
Yeah.
and I thought it was going to be exactly kind of that score, but the other team winning.
The longer that game stayed close, the more I felt like, oh, the Redskins are going to win this. And I refuse to call them the Commanders. It's a stupid name. They're the Redskins. Um, the longer that game stayed close, the more I thought, oh, they're going to pull this off. The one that surprised me
And
was Minnesota.
I'm trying to decide if we underestimated the Rams or overestimated Minnesota. I think it's the
I
latter. I
I
think it's the latter.
underestimated the Rams because I did watch several of their games later in the season where they did look good, but they looked good against bad or mediocre teams. That's why I didn't expect that game to go the way it did. That defense handled the Minnesota offense, which I was not expecting.
See, I didn't think LA played any better than I had watched them all year, and I watched plenty of their games for
Hmm.
fantasy reasons. But I just thought Minnesota, the last two games, the last game of the season and then this game, did not look like a team that won 14 games. They didn't look like a team
No.
that was a playoff team.
Yeah.
So I mean, I agree with who was the announcer on that one? Was that Tom Brady or was Tom Brady the No,
Brady was at Tampa.
it's Monday
He,
night, so it'd been Tarico and whoever
no, Monday night was Monday night, so that was Aikman um
on Joe Buck.
and Joe Buck.
Okay,
Yeah, because that was the Monday night football game.
so it was Aikman yelling at him, throw the damn ball.
Yeah.
Just throw it away. Throw the ball. Throw it away. And he kept yelling at him.
Yeah.
And Darnold just holding the ball for 8, 9 seconds. You can't blame
Mhm.
your line on that
Mhm.
one. And yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, they could not get into an offensive rhythm and yeah, that's going to be on Darnold holding the ball too long, but I still say that was 70-30 the Rams showing up and winning that game versus 30% Minnesota just not showing up and losing that game.
Now, I will say I missed the first half because of school, but from what I watched, you can say good, better, or worse team and who got the better of that play or whatever. But then there are plays where you can objectively say that was an amazing play.
Hmm.
And there are plays you can say objectively, what the hell? And I didn't see a whole lot of that was an amazing play for both sides, but I did see a lot of what the hell from Minnesota. Like in the Houston game, that McConkey 86-yard touchdown, that was an amazing play. We had him manned up. The coverage was good. He high pointed that ball perfectly, landed on one foot, spun in the air in a full stride, and scored an 86-yard touchdown with two defenders on him. That was an amazing play. There wasn't a what the hell on our defense. It was like, well, you go away from that going, how do you defend that? Right. Uh, I didn't see any of that from the Rams in the half I watched, and I saw a whole lot of what the hell from Minnesota.
Mm,
So, but that it even goes back to the Lions game. There were a lot of plays. The Lions were on their third string defensive guys during that game because of injuries. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Why did you, if that guy's triple covered, that means somebody's open somewhere. And yeah, there just was a lot of that. Uh,
All
so
right.
I, and then Philadelphia, actually, they may have proven my point that they're good and they have good star players, but they're not that great because Green
Hmm.
Bay, would they have 12 injuries during that game? Lost their
Hmm.
top two receivers, half their offensive line, a bunch of their defensive guys, and it was still a 9 point game at the end.
Yeah, it
Philadelphia
was.
could not close it out.
There were times where you're like, does Philly want to win this game?
Yeah.
That
There
that's
was
why
one
I'm
guy on the
picking.
team that wanted to win the game, and that was freaking Barkley.
That's
And
why I'm picking the Rams there because you already know McVay is a good offensive coach. I was impressed with their defense in the first half, especially. They got after the Vikings, and I think a big reason Darnold was so bad in the second half was because of how much pressure he got in the first half. So, uh, I think the Rams pull this off, and I think they match up well with Philly, and um, I think it'll be a close game, but I think the Rams in what is going to be a grinding run the ball and defensive grind fest. I think the Rams win that one.
I need to look up an injury before I make my call.
Um, the other game makes me nervous because I picked the Lions to go to the Super Bowl, but the Redskins are riding high and feeling good. And Dan Quinn has demonstrated he can coach. He's got that team humming. Speaking of culture, so the scuttlebutt around here, the last couple of years he was the defensive coordinator, is that Quinn isn't worth the hype. He came in those first couple of years, the defense was awesome, and then it faltered. He's not worth the hype. Uh, he was a flash in the pan. Well, look what happens when he goes somewhere else that does not have the toxic culture that Jerry has created since the late 90s, frankly. Go back and go look up some of the things Troy Aikman has said about the second half of his career and how frustrating it was, and how he had to be the adult in the room, and he uh, to see how long this has been a toxic culture. But also, I forget he took Biotish with him. Now, Biotish was a first or second round draft pick out of Wisconsin to replace Travis Frederick, the center for the Cowboys. And he wasn't considered a draft bust, but he was considered a draft disappointment. He's anchoring that offensive line and doing a great job to help out the rookie quarterback as the center, calling out the protections and helping adjust the protections for Daniels. So you've got a guy that here in Dallas you thought was a disappointment, and now he's playing at a Pro Bowl level in Washington. What does that say about your culture?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, and also you can't discount the old man. When you're talking as close a game as that Tampa Bay Washington game was,
mhm.
and considering he partially caused and recovered basically the biggest play of the game, which was that Mayfield fumble in the
Mhm.
fourth quarter.
Mhm.
Good old Bobby Wagner, my favorite current playing linebacker,
Yep.
perfect movement mechanics. He had a hell of a game. The
Yeah.
first play of the game, he blew into the backfield and tackled the running back for a loss,
And a
a
big
la
part of what
Clowney style, you know?
and a big part of what Detroit does offensively is that double attack of, Montgomery and Gibbs both being able to grind you down, but then also the downhill back and the scat back type, they pair up very well. Well, you've got Wagner in the middle helping you out with that.
Even just from a cerebral level. So he's probably one of the smartest guys in the game. His movement mechanics are perfect, and he's a physical beast. So I think he was one of the big differences in that Tampa Bay game.
Hmm.
I still have to have Detroit at home,
Yeah.
rookie quarterback. Uh,
I this
their
is the
offense,
pick I'm most nervous about, but I'm picking the Lions.
well, I'll make the comment I made about Tampa Bay last week because I'm more confident making it about Detroit. It's hard to come back from 3 touchdowns down, and
Hmm.
Detroit can score on anybody.
Yeah.
But to the Philly game, I actually picked Philly
Okay.
because what I wanted to look up was if Darius Slay had suffered an injury, he was going to stay out because matching up on Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua is key
Hmm. Hmm.
against the Rams. And if you've got at least one corner that can shadow a receiver and just take him out of the game, that makes a huge difference. Plus, LA is a Southern California dome team
Hmm.
who got to play their, even though they didn't get to
That's
play at
true.
home in that home game, it was still Arizona, Stockdale, Arizona. So they're going up to, is it still Soldier Field? Lincoln, Lincoln,
I
right?
don't know what they call it anymore. Soldier
Yeah.
Field was Chicago.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It
This
used to be Veterans Stadium.
Veterans Stadium, yeah, but it's Lincoln now as Philadelphia. It's a harsh place to play. The crowd's going to
I
be in
think
it.
they're going to have weather blowing in the Northeast as well. So I still think the Rams pull it off. I think they run out of gas in the conference championship game, and they're not able to keep up with Detroit.
So I got
Uh,
Philly also running out of gas in the conference championship game and going into a dome against a team that is built for speed. It's they
mhm.
remind me of the
Greatest show on
night
turf.
yeah, the greatest show on turf. 98 was it 98
98,
Rams?
99 Rams. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they do remind me of that. They get to play in Ford Field, which is a dome. It takes the weather out of the equation and which to me Barkley's going to have a great game for Philadelphia, but at the same time there's just too many weapons for Detroit and
Hmm.
their defense is banged up as it is, still brings it.
Well, are you still being the homer and picking Houston to upset KC?
I do. It's our best matchup. And you got to make risk picks for the glory, especially since I got 2 wrong on the NFC side last week. Uh, I think it's the yeah, it we match up well. The only spot on the field we don't match up well wears stripes. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
um,
But it's the old 2024
I,
election motto, too big to rig.
yeah,
Come out there and don't start slow like we did in the last
I am a
game.
little nervous, not as nervous about the Washington game. I am a little nervous about this pick. I hope you're right, but I don't think so. I think KC wins it in another kind of ugly, close game. They've had a lot of those this year.
Including against us.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Mahomes did start playing better towards the end of the season. So I think that's enough to that plus whatever zebra assistance they get.
But
That's enough to win that.
the thing about the KC is similar to the Chargers. Is all we have to do is they're weak at receiver,
Hmm.
so we can man up on the outside, double Kelsey in the middle,
Is
and
there someone fast enough to keep up with the kid from UT? What Worthy?
Worthy. Stingley probably could, but I think that's an area where we play at least one single high safety every time,
Hmm.
and you just leak to that side of the field. Uh,
Because you know he's going deep.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
That way you
Um.
can that way, but also Worthy's pretty frail, so I don't know why teams don't bump him more.
Yeah. Yeah. The last game is the one I'm actually looking forward to the most.
Yeah, Baltimore,
Uh,
Buffalo. Yeah.
Baltimore Buffalo. I think this is going to be a good game. I think we're going to have some good Buffalo weather that will make it some good old fashioned football. And I suspect that Buffalo pulls it out. Like the last time they had a big primetime game was that that deflected pass to himself that Allen ran in, which was one of the highlight plays of the year. But
Wasn't it the
Buffalo
highest single player fantasy point score of a year
probably.
because he got a completed pass, a rushing touchdown, the yards, a
Yep.
completion, a catch in PPR leagues, and it was a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown on the same play or something like that. It was scored really weird,
It
but
was ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. And I passed on him and picked Mahomes instead because I'm an idiot. But anyway, yeah. So I'm still sticking with KC versus Buffalo, and Buffalo finally gets it done in the conference championship game. So I'm sticking with Buffalo, Detroit, Super Bowl. We're just getting there a little differently.
I also have Buffalo, Detroit, Super Bowl, but Buffalo. I'm sticking with my original AFC. I was right
Mhm.
for all the first ones, so I would be flaky if I changed it now. So Buffalo, Houston next week, and Buffalo goes all the way. Philly, Detroit next week, which actually I did have that pick. It's just the route to
Mhm.
get there is different. Philly, Detroit next week. Detroit takes it at home, and oof, I think Detroit takes it all in the Super Bowl. High scoring game
It,
though.
if they get there, they're going to be riding such a high, and with the history of that franchise, the fan base and I think the team are going to feel like a team of destiny. And that is, I mean, that's a big deal. Like when, everyone remembers kind of like how everyone remembers um the Lake Placid win over the Russians, and that wasn't even the medal game, but that's the game everyone remembered because it was such a big effing deal that these college kids beat the USSR, and then it was almost an afterthought that they went on to win the gold medal. Same thing with Boston beating the Yankees to come back from down 3-0. And that was just the pennant. That wasn't even the World Series. And then they ended up sweeping the World Series.
Yeah, but
And
I
I
think if
think
you're going
that
by
team of destiny has a lot to do with that.
if you're going by feels, Buffalo's got to feel the same way. What is this? Their fifth year in a row as a top
That's
seed
true.
in the AFC, and to finally be cracking through. Now,
Mhm.
one of the reasons I picked Detroit is you take Buffalo's greatest postseason advantage out of the equation by having a Super Bowl in a dome in New
Mhm.
Orleans. So
That's
it's
true.
yeah,
Well, but I also think the that Buffalo is going to have a harder route, both physically and mentally. And so there's the chance of a drop off there because you're so drained. In much the same way that I'm picking Philly to lose this week, you're picking them to lose next week because I mean they don't have the depth and they're drained by this point.
hmm
I think there's the chance of it took so much to overcome that hump of get past KC, and I think it's going to be a very rough game against Baltimore. So I think they go into the Super Bowl pretty banged up. Well, we'll see after this weekend.
yep. Hopefully, well, we'll know my risk pick, the first game, 3:30
Oh, yeah,
Saturday.
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll
Well,
have that top left bracket filled, 3:30, well, whatever, 6:30 Saturday-ish, and
mhm.
then we'll go from there. Yeah, because it's Houston, KC, and then Philly, no, Detroit, Washington on Saturday, and then the bottom bracket for the next day.
Yeah.
All right, let us know in the comments if you agree, disagree, anything about the previous segment, which was not as fun. But yeah,
All right. Then we will see y'all Wednesday for who the heck knows what. Um,
some real life topic that came out of our reading Wheel of Time. That's the way I labeled it last time. So
yeah, and that seems to be where we're going. Which I mean it works because again, that's why the books work and the series doesn't. Why so many series don't is they don't feel real. They don't feel connected to reality. No matter how fantastic the world is that Robert Jordan created, he populated it with real people.
mhm.
And that's why it connects. And that's why, to Peterson's point, that's why stories matter because of what that can teach us about ourselves. So maybe we'll since we I have some thoughts on Egwene. So maybe since we kind of uh beat up poor Rand and his trauma, maybe we can talk about the Queen Bee a little bit
Yeah,
and where
except I
that
felt I
comes
feel
from.
like we beat up Egwene a lot during our
We did.
yeah,
We
but
did.
yeah.
Maybe that'll get Scott back though. Scott, where you at?
Where you at? All right, talk to you
All right,
guys
we'll
later.
see y'all then.